celebrating the death of another human being, there's a special place in hell for you. First of all, threat of hell is only hurtful to someone who believes in hell. Sorry. Second of all, I'm not celebrating the death of another human being. I am celebrating a direct and effective hit to white supremacy. White supremacy oppresses all of us. Like, maybe not the oligarchs and the white cishet men, but if you want to argue that patriarchy oppresses cishet men, then you have to argue that white supremacy oppresses white people. It doesn't oppress white people for being white, but white supremacy isn't just about race. It's about the construction of whiteness, the construction of an ideal person. And that doesn't stop at skin color, but normalizing any kind of system where you have to meet a certain standard, a constructed, made-up standard, in order to be able to survive, is a system built on a slippery slope. It's whiteness, it's skinniness, it's ability, it's heteronormativity, it's binary gender expression, it's patriarchy. Colorism, anti-blackness are at play in so many of the systems that oppress all of us, like fatphobia and ableism and homophobia. You can look into how anti-colonial sentiment rooted in colorism is at the core of fatphobia, ableism, homophobia, the gender binary. But anti-blackness and colorism, in the United States especially, on Turtle Island, trickles into so many aspects of our lives. Like, we wouldn't have credit scores if white people had just been okay with, like, renting to black people. Even the layout of highways is strategic to disrupt, segregate, and ultimately oppress non-white neighborhoods. Anti-poverty sentiment, which affects anybody who lives in poverty, is rooted in anti-black sentiment, particularly in the United States. You could look at the language we use for an example of that, appropriating AAVE, Ebonics, like ghetto or ratchet, to mean cheap, bad quality, undesirable in some way. When a ghetto is a place where oppressed people live in forced poverty because the systems of support were not created for them. It's deeply insidious what we do with language. Stealing the language of the oppressed, bastardizing it, and then weaponizing it back toward and against the oppressed. And ultimately, it harms all of us. I am not saying that I'm oppressed under white supremacy as a white person, but I am oppressed under white supremacy as a fat person, as a disabled person, as a woman-aligned person, assigned female at birth, as a trans and queer person. I'm not an expert. There are many very, very smart people talking about these things, writing about these things. How anti-blackness is at the core of so much of what oppresses all of us. And in the United States, on Turtle Island, we didn't get rid of chattel slavery. We just shifted what it looked like. Mass enslavement, mass incarceration, when the bodies that are being used, exploited to uphold an illegitimate economy, look the same now, en masse, as they did back then. A system does what it's built for. If you look at the statistics, death rates, cancer rates, COVID rates, poverty rates, incarceration rates in white versus non-white populations, the disparities you see are not because of some natural superiority. The system does what it's built for. A system built on the idea that black people are not human beings. They are property to be exploited for as much profit as possible, as violently and oppressively as possible. A system that never unlearned that built all of its subsystems on those ideas. That's why those disparities exist, on purpose. And because we're all human, when you make laws that oppress black people, there's going to be overlap. Non-black people are inherently going to get oppressed. We can look at COVID. Because of the history of medical neglect and abuse, particularly aimed at black people in this country, along with other systemic forces that mean that black people are more likely to live in poverty or work high-risk jobs, etc. There were statistics that showed that black people were more likely to be affected by COVID. And they did studies that revealed that when white people learned that, they stopped taking COVID precautions, stopped taking COVID as seriously. This is a really direct example of how white supremacy oppresses all of us. We're in like year 6 of this pandemic, and it's perhaps worse than it's ever been because no one is taking it seriously anymore. And a big reason that no one is taking it seriously anymore is because of that idea that Black people, but also disabled and already sick people, elderly people, poor people, all of these categories that we already consider less than systemically and culturally, because anti-Blackness and eugenics becomes cultural. It's not just your politicians being fascists. It's not just laws. It's how we treat each other. Because of anti-Blackness, because of white supremacy, COVID is worse than it should be. COVID is worse than it needs to be. We have normalized not protecting vulnerable people. We have normalized othering people to the point that we accept their deaths. We accept their suffering. And we lie to ourselves that it won't happen to us because they're other, because they're different. But it's a lie. Especially with COVID. COVID doesn't discriminate. If you're rich, you have more access to treatment, but that's no guarantee because this shit is detrimental. And if you're not taking it seriously, there's only so much your money is gonna do. Just look at Donald Trump. There are theories that he's had strokes. Strokes are associated with long COVID. If you normalize eugenics, if you normalize the idea that some people are expendable, you normalize the idea that you are expendable. And all white supremacy is, at the end of the day, is eugenics. And it's this massive system of eugenics trying to whittle down the ideal person, whatever that is. This construct of whiteness, which no one can live up to because the horizon recedes as you approach it. So true. Charlie Kirk's death is also a great representation of how white supremacy eats us all. He was a violent white nationalist whose utter investment in white supremacy, the lies of white supremacy and anti-Blackness and all that entails, made him believe he was untouchable. To the point that he not only stirred the pot, he turned the heat up below it until it was boiling and he drowned in the scalding water. I'm not celebrating the death of a human being. The only good Nazi is a dead one. What I'm celebrating is the gaping wound in white supremacy, particularly in the idea that whiteness is untouchable. Send tweet.